Welcome to another episode of the Human Monsters Podcast. It warms my little dark heart to see how the Humo Army continues to grow, and your support means the world to our team. But we are more than happy with a glowing review, a handful of stars, or if you just like and share our passion project. We put a lot of energy and work in each episode, and when you respond with a positive comment or just a thumbs up on YouTube, it makes all the work worthwhile. Now, let's get on with the show, and let me warn you, this is not for the faint of heart or weak of stomach. One of the most alluring smells in the world is the smell of a rack of pork ribs on a barbecue, or a succulent piece of steak that is marinated to perfection on an open grill. Give me a pot of oxtail stew or lamb cutlets, sprinkled with rosemary any day, and I will prefer it to a dish with only vegetables. There is, however, certain meat I won't eat, no matter how well seasoned or cooked. Monkeys, dogs, cats, and of course, human meat is something that will never get me salivating, even if it is, according to cannibals, very similar to pork. But to some, this kind of meat is a delicacy that is just another flesh to be prepared and consumed. We are all familiar with the big names like Jeffrey Dahmer and the Donner Party of 1880, but there are lesser-known cases that hit the headlines and are then forgotten. In today's episode, we will visit some of these cases of cannibalism. Some were caused by delusions because of drugs, some were because of mental illness, and some were just because the individual had a taste for human flesh. It did strike me that all the subjects of today's episode are men, but I am sure there are some ladies who will find human meat, which looks like veal when it's cooked, a tasty main course. Catherine Knight, who we covered in a previous episode, is, for instance, one. Regardless, today we dish up some lesser-known cannibals who partook in the kind of crime that makes most people's skin crawl, and that is viewed as the most egregious in society. I hope you were not hungry, because after this episode, you might lose your appetite for quite some time. Part 1. A hearty meal. This was a case of someone who was clearly not in the right state of mind, but it also begs the question if the Oklahoma prison system, which is undoubtedly overpopulated, did not release a man far too soon. The communization of this sentence will come back to haunt the prison system without a doubt. 42-year-old Lawrence Paul Anderson was released in 2021 on an early release, but within days he would commit 3 horrific crimes. He had a long criminal history and had been arrested for a variety of offenses, which included substance abuse, possession of an illegal substance, and domestic violence. His last stint in prison was started in 2017 for possession of an illegal firearm and illegal substances. Considering he was out on parole, the violation was supposed to be serious enough for a longer sentence, but somehow Lawrence managed to get his early release. His parole officer said in court that he was a danger to society and as well as himself. He received a 20-year sentence. He was released in 2021 after serving less than 3 years of his sentence. After being released, he went to live with his aunt and uncle, who were elderly but wanted to give their nephew a fresh start. After being released on the 19th of January, he would commit a triple homicide on the 9th of February. which was less than a month later, he stabbed and killed his 41-year-old neighbor, Andrea Blankenship, to death in her home. He then proceeded to cut out her heart and took it home. It has to be noted that this is not an easy procedure and would include breaking open the rib cage. His 4-year-old niece was staying with his aunt and uncle at the time. Lawrence then started to cook his neighbor's heart with some potatoes as if it was just another ordinary meal. He claimed he cooked the heart to release the demons. He then tried to feed the heart and potatoes to his niece, aunt, and uncle. It's unclear if they actually ate the human heart, but after he was done, he stabbed his niece, his uncle, and his aunt. Of the three, only his aunt managed to survive the attack. Lawrence was arrested that same day and taken to a hospital for what is only referred to as treatment. 2 days later, he made a full confession to all his crimes. Up to that point, his neighbors had not been found. Part 2. The Monster of Munsterberg. For the next example of a lesser-known cannibal, we are going back in time a century and a half. To most in the rural German city, the kindly old man known as Karl Denke was just a peddler and appeared harmless. Born on the 12th of August, 1870, he was a fixture in his community, and no one expected anything nefarious until one day. 4 days before Christmas in 1925, a young man named Vincent Olivier came stumbling out of an apartment where the well-known elderly Karl Denke lived. Karl was well known for helping travelers with a place to stay as they were passing through the German city. Karl was a single gentleman and had no family or relatives to speak of. Vincent was severely wounded and had a gash on his head that could only have been made with a hatchet. As he was bleeding at an alarming rate, he was screaming for help. Karl's upstairs neighbor, Gabrielle, who was a cab driver by trade, heard the commotion and ran to Vincent's aid. As he stumbled towards Gabrielle, Vincent went on and on about the old man in the first-floor apartment that had attacked him. Gabrielle, who was familiar with Karl, struggled to believe this, but he took Vincent to the police station where a doctor was immediately called to tend to his wounds. After he had stopped the bleeding and stitched up the wound, the doctor confirmed that Vincent had been attacked, and despite no one wanting to believe the kindly old man could have done the deed, police were sent to his apartment to interview Karl. Karl was born into a wealthy family that lived near the border of Poland and were well respected. When Karl was 25 years old, his father died, and he left the farm to Karl's brother. His brother did give Karl a portion of the inheritance money for him to start a comfortable life for himself. Karl bought a small farm, but despite farming being in his family's blood, it did not run in his, and he failed to make any profit. He sold the piece of land, and with it, he bought a 2-story home in the town of Munsterberg. This move was an excellent fit for the man, and he opened a shop next to his home where he sold food and other daily essentials to members of the community. He also played the organ at the Anglican church in town every Sunday morning. He never drank, loved children, and was a popular part of his community. After the First World War, Karl's shop closed due to the following depression. By 1921, he had to sell his 2-story house. The people who bought the house decided to divide the house into apartments and were even kind enough to allow Carl to rent one of the apartments from them. He decided to apply for a vendor's license, which he received because he had no other form of income. Carl went door to door and sold everything from shoelaces to soap to belts and suspenders, and once a week he would set up a little kiosk. He would also sell jars of pickled pork, which fast became a firm favorite with the residents of Munsterberg. Carl also applied to the Butchers' Guild in Warsaw, Poland, to sell his meat there. Getting the license was a big deal, and he was able to expand his business. When the middle-aged man was brought to the police station after Vincent's allegation, he flipped the script and said it was Vincent who attacked Carl. He claimed that Vincent tried to rob him and that he had just tried to defend himself. The two stories were so contrary that police had no option but to launch a full investigation. The decision was made to keep Carl in a holding cell while they were investigating the allegations. At about 11 p.m. that evening, as the guards did their rounds, they found, to their surprise, that Carl had committed suicide by hanging himself. The investigators ramped up their investigation. His immediate family were notified of his demise, and a warrant was issued on Christmas Eve to search his home. The first thing the police noticed was the smell of sour vinegar, which was not unusual, as it was used as a preservative. Everyone knew the pickled pork was one of his best sellers. The smell was specifically coming from two large pots that were filled with meat and brine in the corner of the kitchen. The shelves above it were stacked with jars of pickled meat, all ready to be sold. There was also meat that looked like pork in Carl's icebox. This was for his own personal consumption. Chemicals for tanning to make belts and shoelaces, as well as suspenders and other leather products, were also discovered. Nothing was out of order until police discovered a pile of human bones in his home. Some still had meat on them. These were found in vats as they were in the process of being preserved. They discovered 15 pieces of human flesh in these drums, with the skin still attached. 2 pieces seemed to be male pectoral muscles, and the skin still had chest hair on it. A torso that had been cut in the middle at about 2 inches above the navel was also found. A shoulder blade, as well as an abdominal wall, was discovered, and the abdominal wall still had the navel on it. The largest piece of meat that was still intact was about 15 inches by 18 inches and seems to be part of a leg. The victims seemed to be both men and women, and since the liquid in the vats was a brownish red color, the medical examiner said that dismemberment must have taken place after death. On some pieces of meat, the lividity was showing, which indicated that they were cut up a couple of hours after being killed. It's not clear what Carl used to dismember his victims, but the usual instrument, such as a saw, was discovered amongst his belongings. Arms, legs, heads, and reproductive organs were removed and were never found. 3 large pots with a cream-like sauce were discovered, and the meat inside appeared to be pink and soft. The meat seemed to have been cut from the buttocks region. One pot had less meat than the others. It's suspected that Carl had eaten from the pot before he was arrested. Originally, they thought that Carl had served the meat to his traveling guests, but it was more likely that the meat came from his guests and that he had killed them. Police also found a dish with 240 human teeth. In Carl's bedroom, police discovered another level of human depravity. Against his wall was hanging dozens upon dozens of belts and suspenders that Carl had claimed were made from pigskin. On closer inspection, it was apparent that all these items were made from human skin. I think he lived by the motto, "Waste not, want not." In his cupboard, clothing was found, but all of it was covered in blood. A bowl found in his room had an orange kind of fat in it. It was presumed that he had made soap out of it. The shoelaces Carl sold were also made from human skin and were braided in with human hair. Slowly the realization dawned on the police that they were dealing with a monster. In a shed at the back of the apartment, more bones, and I mean barrels full of bones, were discovered. These bones were clean, and Carl had also made himself a pond, which he used for disposal of human remains. He also used the forest nearby to dispose of human remains. In the woods, police discovered pelvis bones, spines, and an assortment of other human bones. The bones had marks that indicated that he had tried to saw through them. Only one small piece of anyone's skull was found. The bones in the woods were those of 3 different victims. Some of the bones were crushed, while others were cut with a knife. In the pond and in the forest, a total of 8 victims were determined to have been discarded of, but even in 1940, more bones were discovered. All in all, 351 teeth were discovered, which must have belonged to at least 20 victims. In total, Carl was estimated to have had about 40 victims, of which none were children, but the totality of his horrific deeds died with him when he hanged himself in that cell. Part 3. The College Boy Cannibal. On the evening of the 15th of August, 2016, in the scenic town of Jupiter, Florida, something would happen that seemed straight from a horror movie and that had people believing that zombies might be real. A 19-year-old young man who had shown signs that something was wrong with him would unleash a nightmare after meeting up with his family at a restaurant. Let's begin at the beginning. Austin Harrouff was born on the 21st of December, 1996, in Palm Beach, Florida, to parents Mina, who was a pharmacist, and father Wade, who was a dentist. He had a younger sister called Haley, and the family lived an affluent life in Florida. The family was religious and stable, but in 2010, Mina and Wade decided that their marriage was not working, and the couple got divorced. Both found new partners, but despite the split, Austin's parents maintained a good relationship, and Austin continued to grow up with love, support, and all a child needed to become a stable adult. He had, by all accounts, a relatively typical childhood. His elementary school history is unremarkable, but in middle school, he had challenges such as weight gain, acne, and the attention of bullies. He also struggled with sleep paralysis, which started when he was in elementary school. He could not move or talk in a walking state, and he said that he felt like his body had been abducted by aliens. Austin did transform when he entered Suncoast High School. He took up football, wrestling, and weightlifting. He was a handsome boy, and academically he began to excel. He even took advanced classes, and by the end of his high school career in 2015, life seemed to be really good and his future very bright. He was accepted into Florida State University, was in top physical form, and he had the support of family and friends. He began with a major in biology, but shifted to a major in exercise science because he had aspirations of becoming a dietitian. He joined the Alpha Delta Phi fraternity, and on social media it seemed that this was just a young man who was excelling in his life with photos of his bodybuilding. But behind the smiles and the perceived enjoyment of life, Austin was struggling. He had hidden depressive episodes, which seemed to appear more frequently and which every time seemed to last a little longer. Austin knew that there was something wrong, but he did not speak to anyone, and terrifyingly lonely he was. He started to keep a diary in which he spoke about feeling inadequate and his constant fear of being rejected socially. Despite his turmoil and deep states and levels of depression, he wanted the world to view him as the perfect son, friend, and all-round person. However, his moods swung from being ecstatic and feeling euphoric and invincible to being thrown into moods that were frighteningly low. To cope with this roller coaster of feelings, Austin had begun abusing drugs and alcohol. He began regularly drinking at parties, which meant about 3 times a week, during which he would often black out. By the summer of 2016, Austin was smoking pot on a regular basis. He would eventually be able to space it out and only smoke once every 2 weeks. Although the weed helped him to sleep, it also caused him to have what he referred to as weird feelings. What complicated and did not help was that he was also starting to experiment with hallucinogenic substances like mushrooms and LSD. He also started to use MDMA, or man, or extract as it's known. These drugs caused distortion and energy surges, which he would also control with prescription drugs like Adderall. He also developed a taste for cocaine. This caused him to either be in a state of delusion or experiencing the highs from the drugs to falling back to the depressive thoughts that would not leave him alone. He was now battling chronic fatigue, insomnia, and the fits of depression were extending more and more. He was also taking 10 milliliters of melatonin every night because he was only averaging 2 hours of sleep a night. Things were not going well for Austin, and he was well aware that he was in trouble. He would search things on the internet such as, "I think I am crazy. What do I do?" And "How do you know? Do you know you're crazy?" He had obsessive thoughts, and his lack of sleep was clearly a troubling component. By the time he returned home from summer break in 2016, Austin's family could tell that something was wrong with him and that he started to look remarkably different. He did strange things that made no sense, like moving his bed into his old bedroom. He did this because he believed that the house was full of demons, and he wanted to be near his family members to protect them. He started to stay awake every moment of the night in order to protect his family. He would patrol the home and would wake up the members of his household to check if everyone was okay. This caused everyone in the house to start locking their doors. His family knew something was wrong, but they thought it was because of drug use. By July 2016, the fluctuation of his moods had amplified. He was no longer able to hide the fact that something was terribly wrong. Austin suddenly wanted to become a rapper called Austin Frosty, and even started a YouTube channel on which he would load videos under his rapper's name. His dedication was noted by his then-girlfriend, Katie. She would later state that during this time, he was so committed to this goal that he never slept while he was with her and worked non-stop on this new project. He told her he wanted to dye his hair blue and wear a thick chain around his neck as part of this new identity. As quickly as the new passion flared up, it was replaced with a new one. He suddenly became obsessed with becoming a philanthropist and a civil rights advocate. Austin was inspired by the momentum of the Black Lives Matter movement, and he firmly believed he could heal racial divides and build bridges between communities. He also became extremely empathetic and would take on anyone's feelings and emotions as if they were his own. He personally felt everyone's loss and sadness. This overwhelming empathy he felt was demonstrated on the 12th of August when a patient at the dental clinic where Austin was working at the time confided in him that all his friends had died from AIDS. This caused Austin extreme emotional distress, and he ended up crying like a baby for the rest of the day. He seemed to experience the loss personally. In the time leading up to the event, his internet searches would reveal deep searches into conspiracy theories, philosophy, and religion. He also became obsessed with yin and yang and Tony Robbins. He also believed strange things such as that he could purify water. He became more and more convinced that his powers were growing and started to do things that masters would have done, such as fasting. He kept lights on in his house constantly, and he slept tightly against his dog, Hubble, because he believed the dog would protect him. He also started to interpret dogs barking as pleas, and he started to identify more and more with a mystical sign, which symbolized him melting together with a mythical being. In the days leading up to the event, he started to feel growing energy and strength inside of him, which were caused by his racing mind. This new state of invincibility and fearlessness suddenly overshadowed his states of depression. He believed he had a force field around him, and he believed he was immortal. He became reckless in his actions. He began hitchhiking and walking into oncoming traffic because he was convinced of his immortality. On the 14th of August, the day before the tragedy, he visited a gun shop with his father and began a deep conversation with one of the vendors about survivalism. The man he engaged with was selling knives, and Austin was convinced he needed to learn more about the art of hand-to-hand combat for protection. While at the gun shop, he immediately started to learn from the vendor skills in how to fight, especially with a knife. This new interest made him feel more empowered, with a sense of protectiveness for others. He subsequently bought a 9-inch knife, as well as a Fitbit, because he believed it would turn him into a cyborg. He was taught how to fight with a knife from the vendor out of a necessity to protect himself and others. He also bought snake jerky. This was motivated by the biblical tale about Adam and Eve, where the serpent led Eve astray as a symbolic gesture. His family by now became very worried and were now convinced that it was not just the drug abuse that was leading to his strange behavior. They considered invoking the Baker Act, in which a person can be held involuntarily by the request of a relative for at least 72 hours in a medical facility. This act, that is specifically in Florida, is there to assist those who seem to be at risk to themselves or others. When the person in distress is unable to comprehend that they need help. Unfortunately, the measure was not taken soon enough, and Austin would go on to commit one of the most horrifying acts ever documented in the state of Florida. In the hours before the event, Austin's behavior escalated. On the morning of the 15th of August, 2016, Austin appeared unexpectedly at the door of his friend Sam Polachek. When Sam opened the door, Austin asked, "What year was I born?" Sam told him he was born in 1986, and without saying another word, Austin turned around and walked away. Sam was worried enough about the interaction that he called Austin and asked him to come back, pretending that he wanted to spend time with him. Sam knew something was wrong, and after a while, the group of friends decided, with Austin and his sister Heidi, to go to the beach for the day. Austin said he needed to pick something up from home, but promised his friends he would return and meet them at the beach. Austin did return to the beach, but there was something visibly different about him. Austin was wearing thick, long pants and a football jersey, as if he was dressed for winter, despite that the temperature indicated one of the hottest days the state of Florida had ever experienced. His choice of clothing baffled his friends, and they even teased him about it, which resulted in Austin lashing out and telling his friends, "If you tell me I am fucking crazy, I will fucking kill you." He then darted on all fours along the rocky strand, like a dog. When he encountered another dog, he believed that the dog's hair was magically transferring onto his skin. Later that afternoon, he embarked on a 4-hour-mile run to his father's house, which is something he had never done before. Wade, his father, immediately recognized that something was wrong when he arrived at the home. He ordered Austin to take a Xanax, but Austin put the tablet under his tongue and pretended to swallow. He then took the melted little white pill, and with it, he wrote on the side of his father's car the words, "Don't trust." He then leapt onto the hood of the car like a wild animal. He fully believed that he had now transformed into an animal. On the evening of the 15th of August, Austin went to supper with his father, Wade, his father's girlfriend, and his sister, as well as his friend, Sam, to a place called Duffy's. He ordered a bowl of chili and, like everyone else, waited for his food to arrive. The place was busy that evening, and service was slow, and Austin suddenly felt trapped and irritable. He felt as if an evil spirit of death was taking over his mind, and abruptly left the restaurant. He firmly believed he was the Grim Reaper, and he left the restaurant to go back to his mother's house. He would later claim he had no recollection of leaving or going to the restaurant, nor how he got to his mother's house. When he arrived at his mother's home, he took a gallon of vegetable oil and started to drink it straight from the bottle. When his mother came into the kitchen, she tried to stop him, but Austin believed he was an animal by now, and this action aligned with his current animal state. His mother also saw that there were big pieces of Parmesan cheese on the counter. Austin ignored his mother, went up to his room, and changed into a new outfit with a "Make America Great Again" hat, and he then returned to the restaurant. It had been 30 minutes since Austin had left, and out of pure frustration, his father grabbed him by the shirt and asked him, "What the hell's wrong with you?" Austin reacted by pushing his father's face away with his hands. He rose to his feet in the kind of posture that indicated that he was ready to fight his father, but the other people at the table intervened and bid Austin to sit down and calm down. He left the restaurant without a word. Kelly, his father's girlfriend, called the police to notify them that he was not acting like himself and was on the loose. Austin began walking for 4 miles to the town of Jupiter, believing that he was guided by the stars. Out of the neighborhood, he encountered what he believed to be a dark figure with a white face who said, "Hello." This was in reality an old school friend of Austin, but to Austin he appeared to be an evil creature who was there to hurt him. Austin screamed and fled as he was terrified and looking for a place of refuge. In his pursuit of a safe haven, his eyes caught sight of a lit-up garage, and he believed that the light would give him the relief he needed. In the garage, which she and her partner had created into a leisure den, was where 53-year-old Michelle Mishkon was spending a peaceful evening. Austin saw her. He did not see a middle-aged woman relaxing, but claimed that he saw a witch. He took off all his clothing except his underwear and ran full speed toward the woman. At just after 9 p.m., as Michelle was screaming for her life, Austin launched himself towards her. A neighbor, Jeff Fisher, was lying in bed when he heard the blood-curdling screams. He ran to his neighbor's house. Once there, he observed Austin beating the living daylights out of Michelle. When Austin became aware of Jeff's presence, he turned to him and said, "You want no part of this." He began swinging at Jeff, hitting him on his arm and his head. Austin was not just punching him with his fists. He was also stabbing him with a knife he had bought at the gun shop. Jeff got the upper hand for a moment, but soon realized he was bleeding profusely and decided to run and hide in a bush. The searing pain from the stab wounds set in. He took the opportunity to run back to his house and call the police. Austin continued to stab Michelle's body over and over again. He was in a frenzy and even began biting at her flesh. Fortunately, she was already dead. He then picked up a bottle of caustic liquid he found in the garage and drank it straight from the bottle, screaming for God to save him. At that moment, Michelle's husband, 51-year-old John Jeff Stevens, had returned from walking their dogs. Austin noticed his presence and immediately brought his attack onto John. He stabbed him in his neck, chest, and head as John fought back with everything he had. There on the driveway, Austin began to bite off pieces of John's flesh. Some he would spit out, and some he would swallow. But the attack was relentless. While he was chewing, he even caught parts of John's flesh in his teeth. Onlookers would say that Austin did not look human at that moment. John was still alive as Austin continued his attack on him. By the time the Martin County police arrived, a 6-foot-long stream of blood was running down the driveway. They found Austin on top of John as he was grunting and making animal noises as John repeatedly said, "Help me! Help me!" Austin was using his hands to pull at John's cheek, to pull more flesh towards him to bite into. John's eyes were wide open as part of his face was visibly missing. The 2 deputies that were dispatched struggled to contain Austin. They tried to taser him, which had absolutely no effect. 2 additional deputies arrived, and they unleashed a police dog on him, which bit his right arm, while officers kicked him repeatedly in the head. But Austin had almost supernatural strength and was fully focused on eating John's face off. Finally, after a final bite by the dog and a kick by one of the officers, they were able to pull him off John's body. Police would later claim that they did not shoot in fear of hitting the victim. When they were finally able to subdue Austin and cuff him, He said, "Help me. I ate something bad." When the officer asked him what he ate, Austin answered with one word, "Humans," as he spat out more of John's flesh. He began begging the officers to kill him because he believed he should die. Austin quickly became unresponsive, which caused officers to rush him to the hospital instead of arresting him. He had gone into organ failure because of all the chemicals he had drank. He was in a coma for 11 days, but would eventually make a full recovery. He spent 2 months in hospital, receiving extensive psychological and physical treatment. His toxicology report indicated that all he had in his system on that day was a little bit of weed. The medical examiner would later state that the loving couple, who had recently retired, died quickly. Michelle died from blunt force trauma and multiple stab wounds, and John's injuries were the same. On the 13th of October 2016, Austin was officially arrested. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 attempted first-degree murder, and entering a dwelling with the intent to do harm while armed. There were many delays as his mental health was evaluated. It would finally be determined that due to his mental state at the time, he was unable to distinguish between right and wrong. Eventually, in November 2022, Austin agreed to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. Austin was taken into custody of the Department of Children and Family to receive treatment at a forensic mental health facility. Judge Bauer noted that Austin was suffering from bipolar disorder 1 with specific psychotic episodes. It will be up to the court to determine how long he will be committed, and he will first be reviewed every 6 months and then once a year. Michelle's family were very vocal that they wanted a trial, claiming that she had done her own investigation and found that he was just a cold-blooded killer and not a victim. It will be up to the court when or if he will be released. Austin showed tremendous remorse and felt a form of mourning himself. Well, I hope you enjoy your supper, and remember that it might only take a moment of your time, but we really need you to like, subscribe, and review our passion project. It means the world to us, and we know that if it was not for all the listeners out there that tune in week after week, this podcast would not exist. Thank you for helping us grow. I'll leave you with an interview Dr. Phil conducted with Austin Harrouff.
Seeing a dog in what?
Saving a dog and hijacking their car.
Uh-huh.
And then it's a blur.
Right. Have you seen a picture of this couple
Yes.
since the incident?
Yes.
When you saw that picture and realized that these were the people that this has happened to, how did you feel?
I felt terrible. And I really don't have words to explain how I feel. It's like a nightmare.
Is it hard for you to imagine that you did this to these 2 people?
Yeah. It's the hardest thing I've ever gone through, or I never imagined that this would ever happen. And I'm deeply sorry to the family that was affected. And I hope that something like this never happens again. I didn't ever want to consciously do something like this, or I never planned it. I didn't want to do it. I don't know. I don't know what to say.
If their family members are watching this right now, what do you say to them? Look into the camera right now, and if they're watching, what do you say to them?
I'm sorry for their loss, and I hope that you can find it in your heart to forgive me. And I'm so sorry, and I never wanted this to happen. I'm so sorry. It's like a nightmare. I just don't know how to say, I don't know how to put it into words. I never wanted it to happen.
Austin, are you ashamed of what you did?
Yes, 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 yes. I just wanted to let them know that I'm sorry. I can imagine how it must feel to lose such a close relative. And it was what happened to me. I wouldn't know what to do, and I would be so sad. I'm just so sorry.
Did you leave that restaurant wanting to hurt anyone?
No.
Why did you do it?
I don't know. If I knew, I would tell you. What?
Do you think you're mentally ill?
I guess so. I didn't know, though.
Did you want to hurt and stab the neighbor that came running over?
No, I didn't have any memory of that. I only remember him yelling at me.
Well, the report is that you severely wounded him and stabbed him multiple times, and he's critically wounded. And he heroically tried to save those people.
I don't remember.
I think, from what I hear, Dr. Phil, he was slashed with a liquor bottle, broken liquor bottle, and he wasn't critically wounded. It was I'm pretty sure it wasn't critical.
Well, I think let's just say he was severely wounded.
Yeah, I don't remember fighting him or stabbing him.
It's all across the back.
Right.
I don't remember how my hands got like this.
Mm-hmm. Well, we certainly don't mean to minimize or trivialize the injuries that happened to him, because he certainly was just trying to help.
Yeah.
And I'm certain that you're sorry for that.
Yeah, I am deeply sorry for him.
Mm-hmm. When you went in that garage, did you drink something in that garage that you found there?
I don't want to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't talk about that.
You had severe burns to your esophagus, right?
Yeah.
And do you know what caused you to go into a coma?
I didn't know. I didn't know at the time, but I guess I know now.
Mm-hmm. And what have they told you caused you to go into the coma?
Whatever I drank.
Okay. And yes. Wade, go ahead. Wade, go ahead.
The psychologist is coming up in 5 minutes.
Okay. All right, we'll be done by then. You just tell me when we need to click off, okay?
Okay.
You felt like you had some superpowers and that you could read people, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you ever remember putting yourself in harm's way by stepping into traffic or anything like that?
Well, when I was walking alone to my dad's house to get my car, I remember like walking in front of cars and stuff like that. I don't know why.
Mm-hmm. So, in looking back, you recognize that there has been a period of time, weeks, even months, that you have been losing touch with reality.
Yeah.
That you've had paranoia, that you have had ideas of grandiosity, superpowers, being worshipped, godlike sorts of things that have gone on with you. And this wasn't something that just happened one night. This was something that's gone on with you for a period of time.
Yeah, I guess so.
And should the courts decide that you were in need of treatment, that would be something that you would lean into. You recognize that you need help and treatment, correct?
Yes.
You wouldn't resist that, whether it was neurology in terms of your brain, psychological treatment.
I wouldn't resist that.
And you know that your dad and I are working very hard to get the proper diagnosis here, because putting you in a cage and sitting you over in a corner is not going to heal what ails you. We need to find this out.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that we're trying to excuse or trivialize the horrific things that happened to the people that got caught up in this.
Yeah.
We're not trying to trivialize that, but by the same token, we don't want to throw your life away either.
Yeah.
Your dad and I are going to work very hard to get to the bottom of this, and I've pledged that to him, and he's pledged it to you. And
Thank you.
all right, so you keep hanging in there, and we're going to keep looking for answers here.
Okay.
And I thank you for asking me to call you. I'm glad I did, and just know that your dad and I are standing shoulder to shoulder here working on this.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Phil.
Thank you, Wade. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
All right, bye.
This episode was written by Misdemeanor. Thank you for listening to Human Monsters. Bye for now.